Welcome, everyone. Today's interview is at ComSciCon convention or conference for science communicators in the Research Triangle Park of North Carolina. So we've got a big lineup today, and second in our lineup is Stephanie Teeter, who studies biomedical engineering at North Carolina State University, and she's also very interested in science education. Thanks for coming on, Stephanie.
Of course.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, what does biomedical engineering entail? Are you just building cyborgs or?
Yes. No, not really. That's what we like to tell people we do. So biomedical engineering at its basic form is using engineering and design skills to create new things that we can use in medicine. So by things, I mean, the instruments you see in the hospitals, your x-ray machines, your MRIs, all that was, designed by a biomedical engineer, though it may have been before the field had a name. But also treatment approaches, new ways to approach wound healing, also stuff with rehabilitation, with amputees, designing prosthetics, that sort of thing. We also sometimes work with pharmaceutical research. Biomedical engineering focuses more on drug delivery. And by that, I mean, how do we get the drug from the pill or the liquid into the patient's body? So, traditional approaches are pills and injectables. But for example, one project is an insulin patch that uses microneedles to deliver insulin on demand. And the patient doesn't even notice it. It's basically like a Band-Aid.
That's super cool. So in that example, they wouldn't have to worry about the pump, because I know a lot of people worry about their pump.
This is not research that I am involved in, but my understanding is that you can connect it to a smart pump. I think that is also something that the lab in my department is not working on. I think they specifically are just working on the patch itself, but I do believe it can be connected to like a monitor that will make it inject automatically.
Very cool. Very cool.
I might be wrong. Don't hurt me if I'm wrong.
It's okay. What is your current research on right now, or past research experiences? No.
Yeah, so I'm split between two labs in biomedical engineering. I do want to say it's actually a joint department between NC State and UNC. They'll hurt me if I don't say that. So I work in two labs there. One is the Orthopedic Mechanobiology Lab. And so by that, I mean we are studying primarily how to improve treatment strategies relating to bone. So bone is, something we all have, something that most of us, especially women, but everyone loses as we get older. Osteoporosis obviously is a nationwide, probably worldwide epidemic. And, we would like to have better treatment strategies than, current pharmaceuticals. So if we can develop a treatment that will allow the patient's own bone cells to regrow bone more effectively, that's something that could be fantastic. We also have a project related to stroke recovery. So after you have a stroke, you obviously experience lack of circulation during the stroke itself, and this can lead to significant problems down the road, including bone loss. So that's something else that we are hoping to address. The other lab that I'm in studies more the soft tissue side. Obviously, bone and soft tissue are very related, but the research is very different between the two. So our primary focus is pediatric knee injuries. So ACL tears are the thing everyone's heard of, and they are increasing very quickly in children. Current approaches for treating any kind of knee injury are the same regardless of age. But the problem is that, a 10-year-old's knee or a 5-year-old's knee is very different than a 25-year-old's knee. And those same treatment approaches don't necessarily work because that 5-year-old's knee is going to get bigger. So we are hoping to improve treatment strategies so that, the 5-year-old's knee can continue to grow correctly after treating that injury.
Interesting. So this sounds like something that you have to be working closely with hospitals with, or you typically don't go into the clinic? Do you see patients directly?
Well, actually, pigs, pig knees, porcine knees, pig knees are very similar to human knees, and they're widely used in this kind of research. The age of the pig can be directly correlated to, human age, with an adult human being comparable to a 18-month-old to 24-month-old pig. And luckily, being at NC State, we have very ready access to pigs.
Carolina is known for, it's pork production, right?
Yes. That being said, we do have an orthopedic surgeon that we collaborate with. But we primarily work with animals.
So I guess you're involved in so many things. Do you have a favorite project? And, maybe you have several for different reasons, but what do you like about each one?
Mm-hmm.
What gets you back in the lab every day? What excites you about that other than just the improvement of patient life, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's all to it.
Yeah, well, so one thing that I love, I actually have a hand in all of these projects. I'm a technician in the labs. And so I can, help as little or as much as is needed. And that also can be shaped by how much I want to help. And I mean, certainly the issue of childhood knee injuries is one that everyone can understand. If you haven't had a childhood knee injury, you know someone who has. And it's also fairly intuitive. I think that the adult approach would not work on a 5-year-old's knee.
Yeah. It's going to change a lot, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's going to change a lot. That's pretty intuitive. So that's, I know, one that I find very interesting, especially because it's so new. Mm-hmm. Even 5-10 years ago, this wasn't really a thing that was hugely on people's radar. Excuse me. I'd say probably that, and then the stroke projects, because strokes are obviously a huge issue. I have a grandfather who passed away from a stroke, and those who survive strokes are plagued by a tremendous number of issues that directly result from the stroke, including increased bone loss.
That sounds really, really neat. Now, you said you're a technician, but you're moving into an education space, right? What is that like, and what's motivating your switch?
Yeah, that's a great question that I could talk about for hours, but I won't. I've been in research for over a decade. I'm not going to tell my age, but it's decently over a decade. And the research is fascinating, and the things that scientists are doing are wonderful and fascinating, and it's very insulated. There's not, a huge public awareness of the nature of science. By that, I mean the scientific process, what, we go through in a lab, what researchers go through. You see on TV that, they grew an ear on a mouse's back and then put it in a person.
Right.
And they're like, why can't we do that? And, there's not really that understanding of everything that actually goes into that was not shown on your, CSI TV show.
And also perhaps why it's taking so long to get from the lab to, okay, we can actually help people, right?
Yeah, that, but also the science way of thinking, of looking at the world, of questioning, of, making observations, and also of refining your knowledge. As scientists, we understand, or I like to think we understand,
most of us
that
should.
We know what we know for now. Mm-hmm. We don't know anything for sure ever, because it could change.
Right.
Whereas with, people who are not entrenched in science as we are, they take these things as facts. And then when, 6 months from now, a new study comes out that says, oh no, eggs are actually bad for you. You're like, wait, why does this keep changing? And so that's something that we in the science field understand.
Right.
It's research, it changes, but a lot of people don't. And so I am part-time in the evenings working on a doctorate in science education. And so I am interested in working with scientists to help them better connect with the public, primarily through outreach. So currently there's a huge variety among different fields of science and how much they value talking about your science outside of conferences, scientific journals, the typical avenues. For example, biomedical engineering at my university and the others that I've collaborated with, outreach is incredibly popular. It's viewed as great. It, helps you in your career. But there are other departments where I've talked to graduate students and they have to covertly do it on the weekends and not even tell their boss that they're doing this stuff.
And expected to be in the lab 24/7, right?
Time spent doing outreach is time not spent in the lab. And
it's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, life is a zero-sum game. Time spent doing one thing is time not spent doing another. And so it's just a question of value priorities. And so I'm interested in examining these outreach efforts and learning why some people, some fields, some disciplines encourage outreach, others frown upon it, and how we can encourage those who frown upon it, if not to do it themselves, to at least be more permissive of the attitude of doing outreach, and also helping scientists to do it better. Scientists standing on a street corner talking about, this receptor and this with all this jargon, that doesn't count. It needs to work.
Way over everyone's head. So along that note, I guess you said some fields are better than others, right?
Yes.
Can you point out some fields that need a little work and some fields that are most improved, perhaps? Or
I feel like I should be naming names. I know I have heard anecdotes of people in the chemistry department at a non-local university where it's actually a situation, like I said, that the students have to not even tell their advisor they're doing it. Someone here today, actually, sort of local university, was saying they have a class on science communication that is offered once a week for 2 or 3 hours because it's easier for students to sneak out once a week than to try and sneak out for a 2 or 3 time a week class and tell their advisor, no, I have this once a week. So, I don't want to call out specifics, but I've definitely heard horror stories. However, like I said, in my department, biomedical engineering, it's viewed as a great thing. And I don't know yet why it's so different among different departments. I'm still very early in the stages of my doctorate. On the surface, one possible reason could be age. There's definitely, people who have been in the sciences since 50s, 60s, 70s might be more entrenched in that view of the ivory tower, isolated. Getting data is paramount, is the most important thing. Whereas people who, as ComSciCon can show, people who graduated in the last 5, 10, even 20 years understand that we don't live in a bubble. Even as academics, we can't live in a bubble, and we have to, come out and open our eyes and see the rest of the world that exists beyond our lab bench. So like I said, I don't yet have any data on that, but just on the surface, that could certainly have something to do with it.
So what's next for you after you get your doctorate in science education? Do you have any specific goals, or just kind of where the road takes you?
Well, first of all, I'm a part-time student, so I have a very long time to figure this out. I am interested, like I said, I'm working directly with researchers. So one thing that's interesting about the education field is that if you're working with teachers, you have to have that street cred of having been a teacher. I don't want to offend anyone. That's not a hard, fast rule. But in general, it's a job that you don't know unless you've done it.
You have to have the experience.
Yeah, you have to have the experience of having been in the classroom. And I have not. So I don't really see too much of a future telling teachers how to do their job because I haven't done it. But I've worked with researchers a lot. Like I said, I've been in biomedical engineering for a while. I was at, Duke for a little while. I graduated from UNC where I did research. And so if street cred is worth anything, I have a lot of lab cred. So like I said, I'm hoping to work with something potentially like AAAS, which is American Advancement.
American Association for the Advancement of Science.
Thank you.
Yeah. I always get that confused.
Something advancement of science. There are also organizations like Alan Alda has an outreach institute that's doing a lot with that, where they're working with scientists via, professional development, seminars, but also directly collaborating on things to help train them to be better spokesmen for their field. It's one thing to have people do it for you, to, hire someone whose job is to write about your research. That is fantastic. Scientists will never replace that. But there's also something to be said for having at least a little bit of ability to do it yourself.
Yeah. And not only meet each other and kind of network, but just learn the hard, fast skills and techniques. Like I was inspired by this conference last year.
Yeah, it's been great. I've a lot of the techniques are things that I already have sort of heard about on the periphery, but seeing it, all put together in such a expert form, expert panels and whatnot has been great. And also to, react to it along with scientists and see, wait, how are they taking this that don't already have, a few years of education training under their belts.
So I guess you seem very outspoken and very like engaged in education and also reaching out to people. Was teaching kind of one of your ideal career paths when you were younger, or why did you choose science? Was science the original path? And then you say, hey, there's a problem in science, reaching out to the public. I need to fix this. Walk me through that journey, I guess, if you could, of like your decision path and.
I always wanted to be a scientist.
Okay.
I come from a very science-minded background. So growing up, hey, Mom, why is the sky blue? Well, because this, things like that. So I was raised to think like a scientist as much as a young child can be. And I went to college focusing on evolutionary and human genetics. And then after college, like a lot of people, I wanted to take some time off before going back to graduate school. And that 1 to 2 years turned into a much longer period. As I saw the people around me working so hard in the publish or perish environment, and they worked so hard to get their doctorates, and then all they did was write grants and write papers. And I never wanted that.
It's a nightmare, yeah.
People that do that, I think it's fantastic. Obviously, it's necessary, and it's a skill that I don't have, nor did I really want to develop. And so, and I did a lot of outreach, volunteering stuff. Science Olympiad is a big one that I did as a middle school, high school student, and then later as a volunteer. And someone said to me, what do you do in your free time? Well, have you thought about doing that? I was like, well, I do Science Olympiad tournaments. You can't get paid for that. And I was like, no, that's true. You can't. But there are other things that you can get paid for that are similar. And then, the more I looked around the lab, the more I saw that there were grad students, coming in and learning so much about their science and then graduating and never having been introduced to these practical skills. And there were PIs, principal investigators, who are coming out of postdocs who then, were being asked, like I mentioned, my department does a fair amount of outreach. So they were then being asked to talk about what they'd done, and they had no training. Which is not to say that they were bad at it, but that there's certainly room for improvement. And, I'm interested in helping with that, but also helping to make those connections in an interdisciplinary way.
Very cool. Very cool. So I have to ask, you have a couple fields here, right, that you've been immersed in.
I do one or two things.
Yeah. You dabble, right? But maybe there are some misconceptions in either the science communication field, or maybe like you gave that example of growing an ear on a mouse and putting it in humans. Are there any myths in biomedical engineering that you want to dispel right here to the audience? Perceptions people might have that you would just like to wipe clean and replace?
We don't all build terrifying robots that run around in YouTube videos. I think the biggest misconception that people have about pretty much all areas of science, but especially biomedical engineering, is the timeline of things. For example, one project that I'm working on is 3D printing an implantable scaffold for knee injury. So rather than, putting in a piece of plastic, can we take, the patient's cells and biological materials, use that to build something and implant it? And
super cool.
That there is a graduate student who's in his 4th year who's only, I hope he doesn't hear this, he might hate me, who is only really just now figuring out like how to create the correct angles in the fibers for this. Forget, how to grow cells on it. Forget how to implant it. Forget how to sterilize it. Like, we are on step 1A. And it's been 4 years. So sometimes people wonder why things take so long.
That's how it goes, though. I mean, it's hard. Like, if it wasn't, everyone would want to do it, and we'd already have figured out every problem.
One thing I've heard people say is that once you have your PhD, if you were to go back and do it again, it would take you 6 months. Because you spent so much time troubleshooting your experiments.
That's true. I've made a lot of mistakes in my first couple of years. Yeah.
Once you know which experiment works and you know how to do it, running it, Like doing it is not a big deal. It's figuring out how to do it. You know, in science, we're working with such novel things that we can't go look at a protocol and say, oh, this is how you do this. Like we are making that protocol, and there's a lot of trial and error, and that takes a long time. So, you know, when I mentioned that I work with knee injuries, sometimes people are like, oh, I need a knee replacement. You know, will that be in the next few years? Or excuse me, they already have knee replacements. But, oh, you know, I need something like that. Will they be able to, you know, take my own cells and build me my own knee in the next few years? And I say no, you know, not unless something dramatic happens. We're a ways off, just because science is very methodical, which can be interpreted as slow.
Well, we got to be safe about it.
Yes.
Make a cyborg and release it to the wild. Yeah.
I do not fault that at all. That is the correct way to do it, because as you said, we don't want to unleash a cyborg on the world. At least I don't.
I know that's really, it's just a terrible example, but it's the only thing I visualize for some reason. Anyways, Stephanie, this has been great. If you have any social media accounts you want people to connect with, go ahead and plug them now. How do we reach out?
You can find me on Twitter. You can search for Stephanie Teeter. My handle is CSteph Science. So SEESTEPH Science.
Gotcha. Okay.
Kind of like C Jane Run, CSteph Science.
Cool. And we'll of course toss those in the show notes for you guys. Any links? And any people interested in the biomedical engineering program at NC State. Joint program, of course, like you said, between NC State and UNC. It seems super fascinating. I found out about it, and by the time it was too late. But it seemed like a really exciting program, and I'm glad we're bringing all these interdisciplinary sciences together in like a hard education.
Can I plug it real quick? So one really great thing about this joint program, it is one of the first of its kind in the country. The graduate program has long been jointly accredited, but the undergraduate one, we got it 2 years ago, I think. And one thing that's great is that if you're local, you know that NC State is where you go for engineering, and you know that UNC is where you go for medicine. So it's combining the best of both worlds. UNC has that amazing world-class hospital, and NC State has those amazing, you know, engineering resources. And students take classes at both locations. You can do research on either campus. Your diploma will have 2 seals on it. So it's an amazing opportunity. I also wish that I'd found out about, it didn't exist when I was an undergrad, but I wish that it had.
No, that's really neat. Yeah. I wonder how the commute is for some students, like going back and forth.
There's a shuttle that will do it for you.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Ride the bus.
Okay, so no worries there. Well, thank you again, Stephanie. This has been phenomenal and really exciting. I'm glad there are people like you furthering science education and education.
I'm glad there are people like you who let me talk about it.
Of course, happy to do it. Good stuff.
Great, thank you.